All right, good evening. Welcome. Thank you, Team KSD, and thank you, community, for joining us this evening. Again, you are joining us this evening for our second of 3 community conversations. Before we get started, I wanted to share a few housekeeping items with everyone. During our presentation, if we could have everyone mute themselves, that would be great. Appreciate that. Also, if you're Zoom savvy, feel free to change your display name to include your organization affiliation or where you're from or whatever makes you feel comfortable. So again, welcome to our KSD Community Conversations. For those that are not able to join us, or for those that can or want to review the conversation after this evening, this meeting is being recorded to share with the KSD community on our website. So you can always go back and review the conversation from this evening. Tonight, we're going to have 3 short presentations. School boundaries, education programs and operations, our EP&O 2023 replacement levy, and our superintendent search. After the 3rd presentation, we'll have time to take questions from the audience. So you'll be able to raise your hand, use the reaction buttons that are here on your Zoom screen, or submit questions via the chat. We'll work to answer the questions as we go through the conversation or through the question and answer session. And also, we're going to be compiling a frequently asked questions to be able to post on our website when we're done. So if you have any additional comments or questions now, or if you want to respond later, you can complete the short form that we'll give you the web address for. You can find it on our website as well. The form will close on November 9th at 11 p.m. So it's additional opportunity to share questions or comments. Okay. We're going ahead and jump right in. At this time, I'd like to introduce our Interim Chief of School Operations and Academic Support, Mr. Randy Heath, who is here to share information about our boundary process. Randy?
All right, thank you, Dr. Behringer. I want to just quickly go through the history of where we've come so far in our boundary work. Last year, KSD contracted with an outside firm, MGT, to conduct a boundary study and make recommendations for the board for possible adoptions. There were several focus groups, discussions, other district stakeholders were consulted, and there was a number of opportunities last year for the public to share through comments, through thought exchanges, surveys, online forums. And the school board decided to only adopt one portion of the recommendations last year. It was the one that allowed us to open up our brand new River Ridge Elementary School, which is a beautiful facility. Maybe some of you have driven by it and seen it. So we were very thankful to get that open and fill it with students from the impacted schools below that had their boundaries adjusted to try to create a class over at a school over River Ridge. Those changes also, they started at the start of the school year. With that came the closing of our Kent Valley Early Learning Center, which housed previously our kindergarten students from Neely O'Brien and Kent Elementary, and they were returned back to those schools. And then students impacted by a boundary change, one of the things that came out and one of the concerns around those initial ones were around our dual language programs, because some of the students who were in that program would be attending a school without a dual language program. We heard the comments from the community, and we made sure and a commitment that they could remain in a dual language school with transportation provided to them if they were displaced from their dual language school. All right, moving on. So there were 3 other recommendations that came to the board last year, and we'd like to bring those back to the board this year. They include the 6th grade students moving to the middle school, the reopening of Sequoia, the former Kent Phoenix Academy site, as a new middle school. Just a reminder that that has been operating as a school ever since it really closed as a junior high. It has housed our Phoenix Academy, and so it is ready for students again. There's not a lot of work that will need to be done to get that ready for kids to return. We want to create 4 feeder patterns based on our comprehensive high schools. And then we want to balance enrollments at the elementary schools to create equity. So we're going to go through each of those in a little more detail. First off, the move to 6th grade students to the middle school and reopening of this site of Sequoia. Just a reminder that the changes that were made last year were in order to open up our elementary school. The further changes that we're talking about really is to create better programs and better experiences for all of our students district-wide. And so it is, some people will ask, we're down enrollment, why are we still moving forward with some of these changes? It's because these are programmatic changes that we feel will benefit our students in the years to come. We believe that moving the 6th graders to the middle school is a priority, and that we will be able to offer the most appropriate program for 6th graders in that setting. Some of the reasons because of that is that our state learning standards and our assessments are structured in a K-5, 6, 8, 9, 12 alignment. And most of the curriculum that is designed and it is used in Washington State are based on those grade bands. Relationship building is crucial, especially at the middle school level. We know that. And 2 years, the current structure of 7th and 8th, the 2-year structure just does not allow for meaningful development of relationships. Kids are constantly transitioning in and then transitioning right back out. And that is hard to build relationships in that setting. And then developmentally, 6th grade students align more closely with 7th and 8th grade students than students from kindergarten through 5th grade. 6th grade social emotional needs, we believe, can better be accommodated at the middle school. The next one is around creating 4 feeder patterns for our comprehensive high schools. Right now, currently, there are some schools that cleanly feed from one elementary into a middle into a high school. But there are many of our elementaries and middle schools that split their enrollments and send them to different schools. This makes it difficult to do a number of the things that we know are best practice. For one, we feel like aligning these K-12s will help create this sense of belonging, and especially in the areas of sports, music, art band, extracurricular activities. They will know that as these elementary schools will feed into these middle schools that will feed into these high schools. And so you can start building that community from the time that students enter kindergarten. It allows for these clear transitions between the levels. We are building principals and our teachers can work at the middle school. They can work clearly with the set number of schools to really transition those incoming 6th graders. And then they can really work with one high school to transition those students into high school when it's time for them to go to 9th grade. They will be much more comprehensive, more than what we are able to do right now when there are multiple schools they're going to. Educational programs can be distributed equally among those 4 high school feeder strands, resulting in some more equitable access, and that is an important piece. And then also it allows for greater vertical planning and collaboration between those strand schools. They can talk about, right now there are opportunities for middle school students to earn high school credits. They can align that with the high school program so that it makes a clear connection moving forth. And then they can really look and see, are there certain expectations? Are there certain types of instructional practices that want to align in that feeder strand? And that would allow those schools to have that collaborative planning together. And then finally, we want to balance our enrollment so that we can create some equity in the elementary schools. Currently, what is best practice would be for, we run a number of special programs at the elementary schools that are not available in each of our schools. Examples of that are some of our special education programs and some of our highly capable programs. And so right now what is happening is they are being placed at schools where there's physical space, not necessarily where the students, the neighborhoods the students are coming from. If we create space at all of our schools, elementary schools, that will allow us to place those programs where it makes most sense to allow neighborhood school children to be able to go as close to their neighborhood as possible and decrease the amount of time they are spending on school buses to get to their programs. A lower number of students at the elementary will also allow us to have less reliance on portable classrooms and have most of our students be attending school within the physical building. And then greater space allows for district to explore other options for community partnerships, such as early childhood education preschool programs or daycare programs, in which that would allow us to have the ability to partner with these community groups to do these types of things.
Okay, thank you, Randy. If our audience has any questions at any time, you can go ahead and put those in the chat, or you can, of course, wait till our question and answer session at the end. At this time, I'd like to introduce our Chief Accountability Officer, Dr. Jewel Harmon, who's here to share information about our upcoming EP&O levy. Dr. Harmon?
Thank you, Dr. Behringer. Good evening, KSD community. I'm excited to come to you this evening and talk a little bit about our levy. We are currently operating a levy right now where our community voted to continue supporting Kent school districts and provide additional funding beyond what the state provides. But levies are funded on a calendar year basis, and our school district operates on a school calendar basis. And so that means that the current levy that our community authorized for us to collect will expire in December of 2022. And so in order to plan and budget for the school year of 2022-23, we have to bring a levy campaign to our community soon to continue that funding throughout that school year. Otherwise, halfway through the school year, we would run out of levy funding. And our levies provide an opportunity for us to acknowledge our community's commitment to a strong community and a quality of education beyond what the state funds. Excellence is one of Kent School District's core values, and our levy allows us to provide an academic program that is robust and that meets the needs and expectations of our community. And in order to do that, we have to have funding beyond what the state provides. And so because, like I said, we are funded on a calendar year basis and our levy expires in December of 2022, we'd like to bring a ballot measure to our community for the EP&O replacement levy in February of 2022. It would be for 2 calendar years, so the years 2023 and 2024. And it would be a $76.25 million request each year. So that is no increase to the current authorization that our community has provided to us. And that would be an estimated tax rate of $1.88 per $1,000 of assessed property value. And we'll talk about that in a little more detail in a few slides. So what does the levy fund? The levy funds everything that the state does not, and that's approximately 15% of Kent School District's budget. And so that includes smaller class sizes, career readiness, student safety, student health services, athletics, extracurricular activities, fine and performing arts activities. These were all items in our current levy campaign when we asked our community what they valued and what they thought we should fund with those dollars. These programs and these activities all showed up as interest, and that's what we've been funding in the current levy, and that's what we would continue to fund moving forward. So what does that look like when we say smaller class sizes? The state funds about 150 fewer teachers than Kent School District employs. And that additional funding for those additional staff members come from levy dollars. And so that's just one example of how levy dollars are used to support an educational program that our community expects and a high quality program for our students. Another example of that is career readiness. So our investments in STEM education and those programs that we've expanded allow our students to take advantage of opportunities that literally sit in their backyard. So Kent School District has Boeing and Blue Origin within their boundaries, and it would be in our community's best interest and our students' best interest to have academic programs that prepare them for jobs in those fields that are literally in their community. And then even before COVID, our community was interested in wanting us to invest in nursing and health supports for our students beyond what the state provides. The state only funds 4 nurses for Kent School District, and we currently employ 17 beyond what the state provides, and that's due to levy funding. And then there's keeping our students safe. The safety of our students ring to the top of our levy survey for the current levy that we're operating. And so we continue to provide investments in our safety cameras and technology equipment so we can monitor our campuses, monitor student events to ensure that our students and staff are kept safe while they're with us. And then there are the extracurricular and athletic activities that are provided supports through our levy funding. And so ASB fundraising does provide some of those supports for extracurricular activities, but it doesn't provide all of the funding there. And so thanks to our community's investment, those activities are also supported for our students. And then last, but certainly not least, our fine and performing arts activities. They are not provided for funding for our performing arts centers for our schools through state funding. So we provide those through levy funding and investments through our community as well. And so now we're going to talk a little bit more about the finances of Kent School District and how that has managed this. So we are excited that we have 2 credit rating agencies that rate us and talk about how we are managing our finances. And Moody's recently provided an upgrade of Kent's credit status to AA3 rated, and they cited management's ability to address our challenging financial situations and deliver strong results. And it's just another metric to show that we are a financially stable and fiscally wise school district in terms of managing our taxpayer dollars and our financial commitments. And so when we look at our levy amounts, what we're proposing to our community in February is a flat tax rate. And so what our current community is paying is around $3.83 overall for the combined tax rate. And what we're asking is that we continue that rate moving forward into 2023 and 2024. But our tax rate for our community that's combined is composed of 3 separate parts. There's the materials and operations, that's the EP&O levy that we're talking about right now, and that's in the dark blue. There's the capital and technology levy that's in the light blue. And then there's the green portion, which is bonds. Our bonds support our buildings. Capital and technology levy support our one-to-one initiatives and other infrastructure pieces around maintaining our campuses that doesn't deal with building new buildings. And then of course, there's the materials and operations, which is the EP&O portion that we're talking about tonight. And so when you look at this slide, what you're seeing is the $1.88 per 1,000 that we're talking about in the far right column. That rate allows us to keep our overall tax rate for our community flat as we move forward and still provide the same quality of programming for our students. And so what does that overall combined tax rate look like when comparing it to other school districts across South King County? And so what you see in that light blue bar is kind of the South King County district average. And those are districts that are neighboring to us and across the bars. And then to the right of that is Kent School District. So we're sitting just below the state average. So in the middle, we are not the highest levy authority in comparing those school districts, but we're also not the lowest. And so this rate allows us to provide a robust academic program for our students without overtaxing and overburdening our community. And so this is just another look at the operations, the educational programs and operations portion of this, when it's pulled out and comparing that to other regional districts again. And you see Kent along with other kind of South King County and kind of Southern Puget Sound area school districts. And what you see is, again, Kent sits to the low end of what we're asking for in terms of funding to support educational programs beyond what the state provides. We are within the reasonably low range compared to some of those other regional school districts. And so these are just key dates for the public to remember. The ballot would be due on February 8th, 2022. Our board will actually review the resolution for this at the coming board meeting on November 11th. We would file with the state, with King County moving forward to actually put this ballot measure on the ballot by December 10th. And then we would begin informing our community and about our ballot and about the initiative to continue and sustain our funding for Kent School District into 2023 and 2024. And thank you, Wade. I think we're going to move on to the next topic.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Harmon. Again, if the audience has any questions regarding the EP&O levy presentation there, feel free to put them in the chat or go ahead and just wait. We'll be ready to give the questions and answer session coming up here shortly. I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Harmon to share some information around our upcoming superintendent search process.
And thank you again, Dr. Behringer. On October 27th, at the last regular board meeting, our board actually moved forward and voted in the affirmative to put out a request for proposals for companies to support the board in a search for a permanent superintendent. And that was part of the work that they did at a previous work session, I believe on the 19th of October. And so what that RFP does is it allows companies to submit proposals to take on the work of helping the board and Kent School District identify the next superintendent. That particular request for proposal will allow those companies to provide proposed contracts of what that support looks like, to include our community and engagement, of identifying key attributes of the next superintendent, continue to vet those individuals and candidates, facilitate the interview process. And the RFP for the actual company, the board has set out a timeline where those proposals or those proposed contracts would be due back to the board on November 22nd. The board would then review those contracts and select finalists that would then provide a in-person kind of overview of the work they're proposing on December 1st. And then the board would then identify and select the company that would move forward with that work on December 7th. I apologize. The oral presentations from the companies that are the finalists would be on December 7th. And then the companies would be notified and the boards would take action of that on December 8th to accept that contract for the company that would then take on the work of identifying the superintendent. And then the board's timeline for having a permanent superintendent in place, they would like to identify that candidate by the end of March 2022 and having them start their permanent superintendency in Kent School District July 1st of 2020. So right now, that's the timeline for the superintendent search. And then there would be more information to come once the board has identified the company or individual who is going to take on the work of supporting the board in Kent School District and identifying the next superintendent.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Harmon. Okay, we are at the point now where we're going to open it up for questions and answers. So let me just go through the process. You can use the little reaction button that's at the bottom of your screen. It's got the smiley face with the plus sign in the side of their head there. Click on that and you can raise your hand, and then I will be able to call on you in the order that you raised your hand. You can ask your question out loud. If you don't want to ask your question out loud, you can go ahead and put your question in the chat, and we'll be monitoring the chat and then asking questions from the chat of our KSD team members to be able to give responses. So either way, whatever makes you feel comfortable, you can just unmute yourself, raise your hand, ask your question, or of course you can put it in the chat. So we've got about 30 minutes for this time. So please feel free to raise your hand at this time or put a question in the chat, and we'll begin the process. Thank you. While we're waiting for anyone who feels comfortable raising their hand, we do have a couple questions in the chat. Melissa, do you see those two questions? I think Nancy Tom has a question at 6:12 and then another one around 6:17.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Berenger. So we did post the link to the survey results. Nancy asked if we could provide a link to the results of the survey and the thought exchange. I need to grab the link to the survey results. Those were shared at the last board meeting. Dr. Harmon went through those.
Melissa.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. I haven't scrolled down yet. So thank you, Dr. Harmon, for that. The next question, also from Nancy, is the community is wondering if a Kent School District Citizens Boundary Committee is going to be set up again. This is an effective way of having two-way communication throughout our district that includes all stakeholders. This committee has always been used in past boundary adjustments prior to management.
MGT.
Oh, MGT. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, so first off, I want to clarify that the work that the KSD has done with MGT is now over. They have delivered their product and their recommendations, and it is now ours to take and make adjustments to, and relook at some of the maybe the suggestions that they made and capture ourselves. So we had received some questions around whether MGT was still involved in the process, and they are not. The Citizens Advisory Committee, it is definitely something that we are looking at in terms of we're wanting to have these community meetings so that we can hear what the citizens want. And we heard it the other day and we heard it again tonight. We are looking at involving really the public in a variety of different things. If these recommendations go forward, there are a number of committees that will need to be formed in terms of just transitions of our sixth graders and other topics. And so we really do want the public to be a part of that and part of that work.
Thank you, Randy. I see a hand from Chuck Hurt.
Hello, thank you for holding this, and thank you for all the work you all are doing on behalf of the community and students. I guess my question, Randy, kind of goes where you were going with that. So are you all starting with a new plan? Are you just trying to fix the issues that were raised last year? How are you identifying what those issues are and bringing people together? And I guess what kind of fits in all that, like what is the timeline for when we'd actually see the impact of feeder patterns and schools moving and all of that? So if you can maybe talk a little bit more about where you were going before that, that's kind of where my question connected.
Absolutely, yeah. Those three recommendations that we spoke about today, the three big rocks, has something that has been identified when we talk to our school building leaders and our other district leaders, as these are the pieces of this that really kind of are central to moving forward. The actual recommendations of the maps around the neighborhoods and other things like that, we are taking a deeper look at. We have our research team actually connecting our current students with those, those residences there, and really pulling out numbers and trying to understand what the impacts may be of those in terms of not only how many students are currently living, that would, there was some kind of real numbers, not that the other ones weren't real, but it's just like now those were numbers that were there. We've had enrollment changes because of all that, so we want to make sure that they line up with what the current population of the district is. We also want to see what that would mean in terms of demographics of the schools and how that would impact the different schools. And then, our research team is really kind of pulling that apart. As far as the timeline goes, it depends a lot. Kind of these community forums and the other information we've had about reaching out to our building leaders and others around what is doable. And then we will use all of that information to make a proposal to the school board about recommendations going forward, which would include possible timelines, and get input from them as to the timelines that they would like us to follow.
And so are you still exploring like maybe more focused community feedback on some of these critical decisions? So should we expect that in January, February, or maybe just not there yet and thinking out that level of detail?
Right. I mean, and a lot of that has to do with the advisement of our school board in terms of, are they feeling like we're ready to make a decision, or are there more pieces that need to be, maybe figured out? And, then what opportunities will we have to bring the community in for some greater conversations around those pieces there? I think whether we adopt a certain thing or not, there is work that needs to be done for the implementation of this work. And that needs to include public voice, community voice, parent voice in those changes. These are some significant changes when we talk about moving 6th grade to the middle school, and we want to do it in the right way. Speaking as a former middle school principal, I know how crucial it is to do this right. So we want to make sure that people are feeling comfortable with the move.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, not seeing any hands. I do see another comment in the chat.
Yep.
Amy, yeah. Amy's question.
Yep. So have you addressed the concerns from last year that you're shifting students from an overcrowded middle school at Meeker to an underfilled one at Northwood?
Absolutely. That is one of our areas that the research team is really digging into and looking at what are the actual numbers right now. And then playing around a little bit with if we went this scenario and this scenario, what would that do to the numbers, and looking at that. And so, yes, that is one of the areas that they are actually taking a closer look at right now.
Okay. Thank you, Randy. And Amy also asked, if enrollment is down post-COVID closures, how can we assess the impacts of boundary changes at this time until things normalize a bit?
I mean, that is always the answer. I mean, this is our current enrollment as it is. And I think what we'll want to do, one of the things that we're trying to do is create capacity at all schools in terms of trying to be able to weather. There's always been sometimes weird trends that happen within neighborhoods for whatever reason. Maybe we have a huge 5th grade class at a school a certain year, and that kind of, and we didn't project that. It just kind of came out of nowhere because a bunch of families maybe moved and new ones came in. So we're always kind of dealing with that. By building capacity within our schools, on all of our schools, then we're more ready to address those as they come.
Okay. Thank you, Randy. So Nancy asked about our research team. Thank you, Faith, for putting a link to who they are and what they do, which is available on our website.
And Jewel followed that up on the bottom, just letting them know that it's KSD staff members who review the district data. So that's helpful as well.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'll just provide some wait time for if you're out there thinking about questions you might want to ask. Again, feel free to raise your hand or put your question in the chat. Okay, we got a comment. We can share that comment from Chuck.
Yeah,
Sure.
I can. Oh, I'm sorry. I can just touch on it since I wrote it.
Sure.
I felt like last year the survey asked families for priorities, but then the priorities create competition within themselves. And so the end result left families feeling like, oh, wow, well, yeah, my elementary kids get to stay, my elementary school stays together all the way through, but now I'm missing out on going to this middle school that's considerably closer to my house. And if I had known that was going to happen, I may have marked the priority of my home middle school, a school closer to my neighborhood for middle school is more important to me than my elementary schools staying together. So I think when we collect data, we get better information when we make people choose between A and B and A and C and B and C, because then you can get a better sense of what the priorities are in the community. So I would just suggest when we look at making these decisions, we actually make people think through the choices so you all know, okay, these are the prevailing priorities that we have.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Chuck.
I do think it's important to remind people that boundary shifts do not happen very often. On average in a district, it happens every 10 years or so, which could be the entire like school experience almost of a student, and ours haven't happened for over 12 years. So basically we haven't made those shifts. And so it's very important when people are kind of considering the big picture of this. They're not necessarily just thinking of how it impacts their family personally. And it's hard to ask people to kind of move out of that piece. And how do we look globally as a community to say, okay, yeah, this might kind of impact my family right now negatively, but overall it's good for the district and the health of the district long term. And so even though it might impact negatively my family right now, I'm willing, because I think this is important, and this is an important. So, and then also I pointed this out at our last community meeting, which is right now, the way, just the way school districts work and the way that land for schools become available and the way that new neighborhoods pop up, we have a large number of homes that do not go to their nearest school. They are closer to an either elementary or a middle or a high school. And because we need to balance enrollments, they end up going further away from their home, the one that is closest, the school that is closest to their homes. And so that is not unique. It is something that happens when you have especially a large district like this.
Thank you, Randy. There's a couple questions in the chat. Do you want to start with Nancy's question and then kind of work our way down?
Sure.
Thank you.
Can we send the links out to everyone in regular KSD communication? It's hard to access it from my phone. Yes, these are things we have shared out, but we will share out. As Dr. Berenger mentioned, after these are completed, we'll be forming FAQs and resources so we can include the links that were included in tonight's chat. And was the research team involved? Christy asked, was the research team involved with MGT last year?
They were involved to some degree in terms of providing input before the recommendations were made, but there was not a lot of involvement once the recommendations came back.
Nor did they have a hand in creating the recommendations. The recommendations in that portion were MGT's work, not the research team's work.
Right.
Okay. And then from Amy, I think I need to read the second one first. What about the students attending Carriage Crest because of the dual language program who will lose their final year in the program? If they move to Meeker or Northwood for their 6th year, they will lose the promised final year of their dual language preparation because neither of those middle schools have a dual language program.
So that would be, you know, something that we would want to gather input on. I will tell you, last year when we, you know, heard some dual language families in terms of that it was important to rein in the program if their boundaries changed, and we were able to accommodate those this year in the existing ones. We would take those into consideration. We know that, you know, Carriage Crest's unique situation, that program was already being kind of phased out as we were going this, and there is the opportunity as a only program in the only middle school program in the Kent School District for dual language is Mill Creek, and that is an automatic acceptance. If you are in the dual language program, you don't need to go through the regular transfer process. So anyone who has been in a dual language program in the district can automatically get transferred into Mill Creek, which is our dual language middle school.
Thank you, Randy.
Yep.
Other questions? Thoughts, comments? Got about 19 more minutes. Don't want to force anybody, but I see Chuck just dropped something in the chat.
Sorry, helps if I unmute.
Oh, you're fine.
So last year, the plan was to have 2 Odyssey programs feed into one middle school. Is that still the plan, or too soon for programmatic decisions?
Yeah, too soon. You know, part of the reason around building the capacity at the schools was so that we could offer programs in the neighborhoods where the students live for the most part, if we can. And so that would all, the special programs would be evaluated based on the needs of who the students are that are currently in those programs, and then those kind of decisions will be made. So the initial piece needs to be done first, and then we will assess the special programs afterwards.
Thank you. All right, I see something else just popped in there. Roseanne, yep.
Do we, it looks like a comment, not a question.
Oh,
I
is it
can read
comment?
it.
Sure, that'd be great, thank you.
Okay, sure. Roseanne said, please keep in mind going to a further school such as Meeker, which is 3.3 miles away from our neighborhood, creates a big impact on our families. This is not the option for the kids to walk home with a further school. The safety factors of having to go much further to pick up a child if there was a natural disaster, and it does put a hardship for families that desire a school less than a mile away.
Yep, thank you, Roseanne. Thanks, Melissa, for reading that. Other questions? Any questions about superintendent search or the EP&O levy? We want to make sure you guys feel like you have the space and time to be able to ask any questions that we can answer for you tonight.
I may have missed it because I had to step away and help my kid real quick. But when you're talking about the levy, I saw that only federal way collects a lower amount. I just saw that slide for a heartbeat. Is there a reason why we're not collecting a higher amount? Or what is the reason we're not?
So that's a somewhat complicated but simple answer. So there are a couple of reasons. So there's a law, there's a levy lid that prevents how much we can collect. We can ask for any amount from our community, but the state prevents us from collecting a max amount. And that amount, I believe, is the lesser of 2 amounts. So it's 25,000, 2,500, I'm sorry, per student. Or I believe it's 1,000. I'm sorry, I'm not gonna misquote that, but the law prevents us from collecting a max amount that is tied to part enrollment and part the property values of your community. So the higher the property values of the community, the lower the amount that you can collect because they don't want to overtax. And then it's also tied to enrollment. And so those two things combined lead districts to land at a certain amount. There are wealthier districts that have the ability to collect a little bit more because they don't have to have as high tax rates necessarily because their property values are so high. Kent School District has reaped the benefit of that of late with us because property values are going up. So we can have a lower tax rate. So when we go, I can't go back to that slide right now, but if we were to look at that in previous years, the portion of EP&O was higher than $1.88 per thousand. I think it was $2.02. So the benefit of having higher property values allows us to have a lower tax rate and still provide the same level of service. But then the law comes in and allows us, that prevents us from having a higher tax rate and actually collecting that. So we could ask our taxpayers in our community for the authority to actually collect, say, 96 million overall per year. But the law would prevent us from actually receiving those dollars, even though our community authorized that and says that they value it. The law prevents us and caps it. And so I apologize if that's a little bit convoluted, but I'm doing my best to answer the question honestly and factually.
Yeah, I realize I could have asked the question better, so I apologize. Are we maximizing the amount that we can collect?
So we are maximizing the amount that we can collect. We are maximizing the amount that we can collect, but we want to be clear with our community and our taxpayers that what we're asking for doesn't allow for expansion, it allows for continuation and sustainability. And so that's why this go around, typically in the past, we've asked our community what new things they want to add, what new things do they want to prioritize. We were very careful this go around to ask how the community felt we were doing with the things we're currently funding. Because we're not expanding or adding new things, we would be continuing and sustaining those programs.
Thank you. And I apologize for making you do the big explanation to start.
All right. Thank you. Melissa, we have a question from Amy.
Okay. So Carriage Crest rarely has students continuing to Mill Creek for the dual language program due to no busing provided. The Carriage Crest sixth graders would lose their busing to a dual language school. This is an equity issue for the sixth graders who would get moved to a middle school that doesn't have busing. How will you address this? Bus 2 entire classes for 2 years to a different school for sixth grade. This would impact your estimates for class sizes as well.
Yeah, I mean, that is one of the issues that we would need to look deeper into if we were making this move. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Michelle, for your
Yep.
positive comment there. Christy, got a question at the bottom?
Sure. So Christy asked, in regards to the levy and funding, are there still ESSER funds to be spent in our district? Where have those dollars gone?
So absolutely, there are still ESSER dollars available to our district. They are federally funded and they will be with us through 2024, the calendar year of 2024. The vast majority of those dollars have not been spent. As part of our academic well-being and recovery plan, the dollars are tied to funding those initiatives and those strategies laid out in that plan. We shared the initial plan and start with our board, I think was that September of 2021. I'll find the link to the board meeting about that plan. And then we will be providing an update per OSPI to our board and our public in the future. And that will, again, continue to lay out where those ESSER dollars will go and kind of what programs would be supported by that work with ESSER. Right now, some of that funding is being spent on programs directly in schools, like after school programs, additional reading and academic supports for students to support some of the learning struggles that happened last school year, ESSER dollars have also been used to provide PPE. They're funding our contact tracers across the district as well. So we're providing funding for some of those things as right now, but the vast majority of ESSER dollars have not been spent because we have to spend them over the course of the next 3 years. So we don't want to spend all of those dollars up front. We actually want to have enough dollars to spend to support the additional student needs as they come and develop over the next 2 to 3 years.
Nancy has a question. Yep.
Yeah, Nancy asked, when will that update to the board be? So we just recently did another update at the first October meeting. We've done a few updates on this and they're all available on board docs. At this point, we are waiting for OSPI to release the next round of compliance reporting that we need to do for them on where we're at. And that will come back before the board as informational as we've shared at the last board meeting.
Thanks, Melissa.
Mhm.
Other questions in any of our 3 topics or comments? We've got about 8 minutes or so left. Well, as you're thinking, just as a reminder, we've got our last community conversation on Saturday from 9 to 10 in the morning. So if you're a weekend person, or if you have friends in the community that would like to engage in this particular forum, encourage them to join us Saturday morning. Or if you'd like to come back because you have some questions that have popped up over the next few days, feel free to come back and join us as well. Oh, thank you, Faith, for putting that back in there again for the forums. All right, Christy. I knew if I filled some of that airtime, that someone would have another question or a comment. Christy's got a comment there.
So Christy says the vast majority of the public doesn't know about these discussions or meetings and what is really on the table. It would be nice to have KSD send out more notices to parents. Yeah, we've sent it out a few times, multiple ways through our KSD platforms, and we have more scheduled this week before our final conversation on Saturday. But thank you. And will a recording of tonight's session be shared? Tori asked. Absolutely. We had it up the following day after our first conversation last week, so we should be able to get that posted tomorrow as well.
Right.
And Chuck asked, is there any consideration to keep kids in their current school if they'd like, if they are at a transition year, heading into 5th, 8th, 12th, etc.?
I mean, that is one of the things that can be discussed. Currently, our policies and procedures allow for a request for a transfer to be made at that point that might allow them to stay at the school if they were impacted by this change. And we know that we did have some this last year by the changes that were already made. So there is a process for those requests to be made.
And then there, of course, are no guarantees, right, in that process?
Correct. There are no guarantees. It is always on a space availability basis because we must serve the students in the boundary area first and then consider ones outside.
Yeah, so I guess that's my suggestion for consideration if this is what this is. Community feedback is, given how much change kids have gone through the last couple of years, is at those transition points, they're given special consideration, but basically a right to stay at that school for that final year.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely something that could be considered.
Okay. Nancy just made a comment, then has a question about where the email is going.
So when we send emails, from the district to families. We use the emails in Skyward that families have. And if you've opted into text message, so we send it in new in the blue. It's been on website, social media, I believe a mobile app push. So those are but our source is always Skyward contact information. Happy to check on that for you, Nancy, and make sure that we have the same email and that it's getting to you. And then Amy asked, what about students with special needs? A few weeks ago, I was surprised to have our daughter's doctor ask about what middle school in Kent she'd be attending. When we mentioned the possible boundary change, she expressed concern that my daughter wouldn't get equal accommodations if she went to Meeker. That what was available to her was far inferior at Meeker. How do we account for the special needs students who are better accommodated at Northwood?
Yeah, wow. Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure why I'm not sure how a doctor would have that knowledge. I guess I would encourage your doctor to reach out to our executive director of inclusive education, Spencer Pan, to really, if there are concerns that this doctor is feeling like certain needs are not being met at a certain school, I would welcome him to reach out to the person that is in charge of that in our district. I will say that students with special needs are evaluated on an individual basis, and a team decision is made within, and parents are part of that in order to understand what services they receive. So yeah, yeah. I mean, we can't speak to that because we're not exactly sure what this doctor is speaking about, but I do encourage you to share with that doctor that we'd be happy to have a conversation with them.
Okay, a couple more minutes. Nancy has a comment there.
Yep. So yeah, we can send it out more ways and more often, and happy to do that. I think it's always striking a balance with information coming from schools and then to how all families of all 25,000 plus students want to receive it. But I hear you loud and clear, Nancy. Send it more often, more frequently, so it's more easily accessible. Thank you.
All right, we've got about a minute left. Is there any other questions? Again, of course, if you think of a question as soon as we get off or over the next couple of days, you can join us again on Saturday. You can also reach out in the link that's been shared a couple different times in the chat and fill out the form with questions or comments. And then those questions will work to get answers, and they'll be part of our FAQs that Melissa spoke of earlier and I shared earlier in the opening. So you'll be able to have access to that as well as soon as we're able to finish all of our community conversations. So I'll give it the last 30 or 40 seconds if there's any last questions or comments. We do appreciate you taking the time to join us this evening and asking those questions, and hopefully you're feeling a little bit more comfortable or more knowledgeable. Hopefully you're able to share maybe what you learned tonight or the access to the recorded sessions and information that we gave with those that are not able to join us this evening. Okay. With that said, thank you all very much for taking the time this evening to join us. Have a great rest of your evening. Have a great rest of your week. And I'm sure we'll see some of you on Saturday morning. And if not, thank you for your time. Have a great night.